Today on Theology Reexamined, we are going to take a look at one of the fundamental flaws that becomes apparent when many people express their objections to the Sabbath being established for all people at creation. We're going to listen to Alan Parr make one particular objection, which is there is no law given to Adam in order for him to observe it or for his descendants to observe it. And we will see that particular flaw in action. And then in video number 4, not the next video, but the following video, we will seek to show how we can overcome falling into that trap when we are doing our biblical exegesis. So let's get into it.
Didn't God institute the Sabbath at creation? Now, this is coming from the Adventist.org website. They say, the gracious Creator, after the 6 days of creation, rested on the seventh day and instituted the Sabbath for all people as a memorial of creation. Okay, now there's a lot of problems in that statement right there. First and foremost, nowhere before the 10 Commandments were given in the Bible was there a law that was written down or established that people had to observe the Sabbath. Nowhere. What did happen is God did rest on the seventh day. But just because God did that does not mean we need to equate it and say there is now a law in place that we must obey, and if we don't, we're not saved.
I'm beginning to see the problem here. It would seem that those who believe that the Sabbath was established at creation, but don't see it as any injunction on humanity to keep it also, are getting stuck at a particular point. Let's see if you can spot that point with me.
How should you and I observe the Sabbath day as a New Testament Christian? And I want to just share with you what I believe is a good practice for how we as New Testament Christians can observe the Sabbath. So I want to do 3 things. Number 1, I want to talk about what was the principle that God laid down for the Sabbath day. Number 2, what is the purpose of it? Why is it that God even wanted us to honor it in the first place? And then most importantly, I want to make sure you stay tuned. How can we practice this in a practical way as a New Testament believer? Okay, number 1, the principle of the Sabbath day is clearly laid out in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. I'm going to read just a portion of it. And it says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. So let's stop right there. Notice here that inherent in the Sabbath day principle is the idea or the command that we should be working 6 out of the 7 days. He says you have 6 days to do your work. So don't let anyone make you feel guilty if you are working hard for 6 days out of the week. Even the New Testament confirms that if we do not work, we should not eat. So he says you've got 6 days to work and I want you to rest 1. That is the principle. Work 6, rest 1. Notice in verse 10, it says, but the Sabbath day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Why? Because in verse 11 it says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So the idea here is this: if God took a day off, and we know God did not do it because he was tired, he simply rested from his work. If God can do that, and if he saw fit to do that, then who are we to think that we can just work 24/7 around the clock without getting any rest at all?
Did you catch it? Have you seen the problem yet?
Okay, the second question I want to answer is, what was the purpose of the Sabbath? Why did God establish it? Well, in the Old Testament, one of the reasons is because it was supposed to be a test of their faith.
Have you got it now?
If you notice in the wilderness season, God rained down manna from heaven and he said, hey, every morning I want you to pick up this manna off of the ground so that you'll have enough food to eat. But on the sixth day, he said, I want you to gather twice as much manna because I don't want you gathering manna on the seventh day. In this was a test of their faith.
Okay, if you haven't got it yet, let me break it down. All the examples of a perceived principle are coming from the Exodus experience. Now, we have to remember that Exodus and Genesis, in terms of books, are written in roughly the same time period, very close to one another. So, yes, the Exodus experience has a lot to do with the presentation of Genesis. However, we also have to bear in mind that Genesis is God's self-revelation to Moses, giving him an understanding of what took place some 2,500 years before he was even born. So the principle being expressed in the book of Genesis, while has a bearing on the way the children of Israel are operating, the principle is not actually being established through the people of the Exodus. The principle is established right there in the Garden of Eden. So if we're going to look for a principle, we have to look for it at the beginning. And it's not the things that Alan Parr is actually saying or pointing out as the principle. In video 4, not the next one, but video 4, you will hear what that principle actually is.